The banker's polished shoes hit the dried earth of Bethany Radford's small farm with the finality of a judge's gavel, and she knew before he opened his mouth that her world was about to collapse. It was late March in 1876, and Desdemona, Texas, had been suffering through a drought that seemed determined to strangle the life from every struggling homestead in the county. Bethany stood on the sagging porch of the modest farmhouse her late husband had built with his own hands 3 years earlier, her calloused fingers gripping the weathered railing as Martin Greaves approached with his leather satchel, and that expression of false sympathy she had come to despise. "Mrs. Radford," he called out, tipping his hat with exaggerated courtesy. "I trust you know why I am here." She did. The loan payment was due 2 weeks ago, and she did not have it, could not have it. The winter wheat had failed. The chickens had stopped laying from stress and poor feed, and the cow she had been counting on to sell had died of some mysterious ailment that the veterinarian could not identify before demanding payment she also did not have. At 23 years old, Bethany had already buried a husband, lost an infant son to fever, and watched her dreams of a prosperous farm turn to dust as fine and bitter as the Texas wind that scoured her fields. "Mr. Greaves," she replied, keeping her voice steady through sheer force of will. "I know I am behind on the payment. I need more time." The banker mounted the steps, his expression shifting to something that might have passed for regret on a less calculating face. "Mrs. Radford, we have extended your deadline twice already. The bank cannot continue to operate on goodwill and empty promises. You owe $347, and unless you can produce that sum today, I am afraid I have no choice but to begin foreclosure proceedings." $347. It might as well have been $3,000. Bethany had exactly $12.30 to her name, hidden in a coffee tin behind the loose board in the kitchen. She had been saving it for seed, for the spring planting that would never happen now. "Please," she said, and hated the way her voice cracked on that single word. "This farm is all I have left of him, of our life together. There must be something I can do." Greaves reached into his satchel and produced a sheaf of papers. "Sign these and the transfer will be clean. The bank will take possession of the property, and you will have 30 days to remove your personal effects. I can arrange for you to stay at the boarding house in town, perhaps find you employment at the dress shop or the hotel. You are still young, Mrs. Radford. You can start over. Start over." As if the years of backbreaking work, the love poured into every fence post and furrow, the grave of her baby boy beneath the cottonwood tree by the creek, could all be simply left behind like an old coat that no longer fit. "I will not sign," Bethany said, lifting her chin. "You will have to drag me from this land." "That can be arranged," Greaves replied coldly, "but it will be far more unpleasant for everyone involved. Be reasonable, Mrs. Radford. Get off my property." The banker's mouth tightened into a thin line. "You have until Friday, 3 days. If you do not have the money by noon on Friday, I will return with the sheriff, and you will be removed. Good day, Mrs. Radford." He descended the steps and walked back to his buggy with the same measured pace, as if he had just concluded a perfectly ordinary business transaction. Bethany watched him drive away, dust rising behind the wheels like smoke from a funeral pyre, and only when he disappeared from sight did she allow herself to sink down onto the top step and press her face into her hands. She did not cry. She had learned long ago that tears changed nothing, fixed nothing, and only left her with swollen eyes and a pounding headache. Instead, she sat in the late afternoon sun and tried to think of some solution, some miracle that would materialize $347 from the parched earth. Nothing came to her. No brilliant ideas, no hidden resources, No wealthy relatives who might suddenly appear with open purses and generous hearts. Her parents were dead. Her husband's family had never approved of the marriage, and her few friends in town were struggling just as hard as she was to keep their own lives from falling apart. The sound of hoofbeats made her look up, expecting Greaves to have returned with some new cruelty or forgotten document. Instead, she saw a man on a massive roan horse approaching from the direction of the foothills. He was not from town. Bethany knew everyone in Desdemona, and she would have remembered this man. He was enormous, for one thing. Even from a distance, she could see the breadth of his shoulders, the powerful build of someone who lived a life of constant physical labor. His dark hair fell past his shoulders, and a thick beard covered the lower half of his face. He wore buckskin trousers, a faded blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle, and a wide-brimmed hat that had seen better days. A rifle rested across his saddle, and various supplies were packed behind him, suggesting he had been traveling for some time. He reined in his horse a respectful distance from the porch and removed his hat. His eyes, Bethany noticed, were a startling shade of blue-green, like the shallow water of a creek on a summer day. "Madam," he said, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to resonate in her chest, "I apologize for the intrusion. I saw the man leaving and you seemed distressed. Are you all right?" Bethany stood, smoothing her worn skirt self-consciously. "I am fine, sir. Thank you for your concern." He studied her for a long moment, and she had the uncomfortable sensation that he could see straight through her polite lie. "That was Martin Greaves," he said. "It was not a question." "You know him?" "Know of him. I have been in the mountains for the better part of 2 years, but I hear things when I come down for supplies. Greaves has a reputation for squeezing folks until they have got nothing left to give." He swung down from his horse with easy grace, moving lightly despite his size. "Russell Wolfe, madam. I used to have a place north of here before I decided civilization was more trouble than it was worth." "Bethany Radford," she replied automatically. "This is my farm, or it was. The bank is foreclosing." She had not meant to say that last part. The words simply slipped out, escaping before she could stop them. Russell Wolfe did not react with the pity or discomfort she expected. Instead, he nodded slowly, as if she had just confirmed something he had already suspected. "How much? I beg your pardon. How much do you owe?" Bethany bristled. "That is none of your concern, Mr. Wolfe. I do not need charity from strangers." "Did not offer charity," he said mildly. "Asked a question. Why would you possibly care?" He was quiet for a moment, his gaze drifting past her to the farmhouse, the sagging barn, the empty fields stretching toward the horizon. "I have been up in those mountains for a long time," he said finally. "Living off game and fish, sleeping under the stars, answering to no one. It is a good life in many ways, but it is lonely. And lately, I have been thinking it might be time to come back down, try to be part of the world again." His eyes returned to hers. "I have money saved, more than I need for one man living alone. And I have been looking for a reason to stay in one place, build something that matters." "You want to buy my farm," Bethany said flatly. "No, madam, I want to pay your debt and help you keep your farm." She stared at him, certain she had misheard. "That is insane. You do not even know me." "True enough. I could not possibly repay you. Did not ask you to." "Then what do you want?" Bethany demanded, suspicion flaring hot in her chest. She had heard stories about men who preyed on desperate women who offered help with strings attached that turned into chains. "I am not going to be any man's bought woman, Mr. Wolfe. I would rather lose the farm." His expression darkened. "I am not that kind of man, Mrs. Radford. I am offering help because I can and because it seems like you need it. Nothing more. Nobody does something for nothing." "Maybe I am nobody then." He put his hat back on. "I will leave you be. I apologize for troubling you." He turned toward his horse, and Bethany felt panic surge through her veins. He was walking away. This impossible, miraculous solution was walking away because she had insulted him, accused him of terrible things when all he had done was offer kindness. "Wait," she called out. "Please wait." Russell Wolfe paused, his hand on the saddle horn. "I am sorry," Bethany said, descending the steps. "I should not have said that. You startled me, and I spoke without thinking. It is just that I have been trying so hard to figure out what to do, and then you appear out of nowhere offering to solve all my problems, and it does not make sense. Things like that do not happen, not to people like me." He turned back to face her. Maybe they should happen more often. She wanted to argue, to maintain her pride and independence, but $347 stood between her and losing everything. Pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. $347, she said quietly. "That is what I owe, and Mr. Wolfe, if you truly mean what you say, then yes, I would be grateful for your help. But I will find a way to repay you. I do not know how or when, but I will." Russell Wolfe walked back toward her, covering the distance in a few long strides. Up close, he was even more imposing. He stood well over 6 feet tall, and his presence seemed to fill the space around him. But his eyes were kind, and when he spoke, his voice was gentle. "You can repay me by letting me help you plant those fields and get this farm running again. I know how to work the land, and I have got a strong back and time to spare. We can be partners. You provide the place, and I provide the labor. When the crops come in, we split whatever profit there is." Fair, it was more than fair. It was extraordinarily generous. Bethany searched his face for some sign of deception or ulterior motive and found none. He simply looked like a man who meant what he said. "Why?" she asked one more time. "Why would you do this for me?" Russell was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. "My wife died 4 years ago," he said finally. "Cholera. We had a farm not unlike this one. After she passed, I could not stand to be there anymore. I sold everything, took to the mountains, and tried to forget." "But you cannot outrun grief, Mrs. Radford. It follows you everywhere. Lately, I have been thinking maybe the better thing would be to honor her memory by helping someone else hold onto what they love. Maybe that is a better way to remember her than hiding in the wilderness." Bethany felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back. "I am sorry for your loss, and I am sorry for yours." He extended his hand. "Do we have an agreement?" She looked at his hand, broad and scarred and steady. Then she placed her smaller hand in his and shook firmly. "We have an agreement, Mr. Wolfe." "Russell," he said. "If we are going to be partners, you should call me Russell, then you should call me Bethany." "All right, Bethany." He released her hand. "Now, when is Greaves coming back?" "Friday at noon." "Then we need to get to town and settle this debt before he can file any paperwork. You have a horse in the barn, but she is old and not terribly fast. She will do. Let me tend to my horse, and then we can ride into Desdemona together. The bank will still be open for another few hours." Bethany nodded, still trying to process the sudden turn her day had taken. An hour ago, she had been facing the loss of everything. Now she had a partner, a mountain man who had materialized like something from a story her mother used to tell, and a chance to save her home. She watched Russell Wolfe lead his horse toward the barn, his movements efficient and practiced. He walked like a man who was completely comfortable in his own skin, who had no need to prove anything to anyone. There was something deeply reassuring about that confidence, about the way he had simply assessed the situation and taken action without hesitation or drama. Bethany went inside to wash her face and change into her better dress, the dark blue one that was only slightly faded and had all its buttons. She pinned her blonde hair up more neatly, and tried to look like a respectable farm woman rather than someone who had been moments away from breaking down in despair. When she emerged, Russell had saddled both horses and was waiting beside them. He helped her mount with casual strength, his hands steady on her waist, and then swung onto his own horse. They set off toward Desdemona at a steady trot, the late afternoon sun painting the landscape in shades of gold and amber. "How long have you had the farm?" Russell asked as they rode. "My husband, James, homesteaded it 4 years ago. We were married that same year. He built the house and the barn, cleared the fields, dug the well. Everything was going well until 2 years ago when he was thrown from his horse and broke his neck. He died 3 days later." "Leaving you alone to manage everything?" "Yes," Bethany swallowed hard. I truly did, but it has been one disaster after another. The drought, the failed crops, losing livestock, and then the baby." She stopped, the words catching in her throat. "You do not have to talk about it," Russell said quietly. "No, it is all right. It has been over a year now. He was only 6 months old. Fever took him in the space of a night. By morning he was gone." She stared straight ahead, willing herself not to cry. "After that, I could not seem to get ahead. Every time I started to recover, something else went wrong. The bank kept extending the loan, but the interest kept mounting, and finally they decided they were done waiting." "That is hard," Russell said. "Harder than most people could bear." "I did not have a choice. You bear it or you die. I chose to keep going. That takes strength." Bethany glanced at him, surprised by the admiration in his tone. "Or stubbornness. Sometimes they are the same thing." They reached Desdemona as the sun was lowering toward the horizon. The town was small, just a main street lined with wooden buildings that had been weathered gray by the relentless Texas sun. The general store, the saloon, the hotel, the dress shop, the bank. Everything a frontier town needed and nothing it did not. Russell tied the horses outside the bank, and they went inside together. The interior was cool and dim, with a single clerk sitting behind a wooden counter. He looked up as they entered, his expression shifting to something carefully neutral when he saw Bethany. "Mrs. Radford," he said. "Mr. Greaves is not here at the moment." "That is fine, Thomas," Bethany replied. "I am here to make a payment on my loan. The full amount." Thomas blinked. "The full amount?" "That is correct." Russell stepped forward and placed a leather pouch on the counter. It landed with the unmistakable weight of coins. $347, he said. "Count it if you need to." Thomas stared at the pouch as if it might contain a snake. Yes, of course. Let me get the ledger." He disappeared into the back office, and Bethany heard low voices, one of them unmistakably belonging to Martin Greaves. A moment later the banker emerged, his face flushed. "Mrs. Radford," he said, his voice tight. "Thomas tells me you wish to settle your account." "I do." "And where, may I ask, did you acquire such a sum?" "I do not believe that is any of your concern, Mr. Greaves. The loan agreement does not stipulate where the money must come from, only that it be paid." Greaves' eyes shifted to Russell, taking in his size and rough appearance. "And who might you be?" "Russell Wolfe, a friend of Mrs. Radford." "I see. And you provided her with this money." "The source of the payment is irrelevant," Russell said, his tone hardening. "Mrs. Radford is here to pay what she owes. Either accept the payment and mark her debt as satisfied, or explain to your superiors why you refused legal tender." For a moment, Bethany thought Greaves might actually refuse. His jaw worked, and his hands clenched into fists at his sides. But then he forced a smile and gestured to Thomas. "Count it out," he ordered. Thomas emptied the pouch and began counting the coins, stacking them in neat piles. The process seemed to take forever, each clink of metal against wood ringing through the silent bank. Finally, he looked up. $347 exactly, Mr. Greaves. The banker's expression soured even further, but he pulled out a receipt book and began writing with sharp, angry strokes. When he finished, he tore the page free and handed it to Bethany. "Your debt is paid in full," he said curtly. "I trust you will be more responsible with your finances in the future, Mrs. Radford." Bethany took the receipt and folded it carefully, tucking it into her pocket. "I trust you will be more compassionate with your borrowers in the future, Mr. Greaves. Good evening." She turned and walked out, Russell following close behind. The evening air felt sweeter than it had in months, and Bethany found herself smiling despite everything. "Thank you," she said when they reached the horses. "I do not know how I can ever properly thank you." "You already did, back at the farm. Now let us get you home. We have got work to start tomorrow." They rode back as twilight settled over the land, painting everything in shades of purple and deep blue. Bethany felt lighter than she had in years, as if some terrible weight had been lifted from her shoulders. The farm was hers. She was safe. And she had a partner, this strange mountain man who had appeared in her darkest hour, like an answer to a prayer she had not even known she was praying. When they reached the farm, Russell insisted on tending to both horses while Bethany went inside to prepare supper. She had not eaten properly all day, too anxious about the confrontation with Greaves, and now her stomach was reminding her loudly of that neglect. She made a simple meal of beans and cornbread, apologizing for the plainness of it when Russell came inside. "This is a feast compared to what I have been eating in the mountains," he assured her, sitting down at the rough wooden table. "Roasted squirrel gets old fast." They ate in companionable silence for a while, and then Bethany asked, "Where will you stay? I do not have a proper guest room, and the barn is not exactly comfortable." "The barn will do fine for now. I have slept in worse places." "That does not seem right." "You just paid off my entire debt, and I am offering you a place in the barn." Russell shrugged. "I am used to sleeping rough. Besides, it would not be proper for me to stay in the house with you. People would talk." "People will talk anyway the moment word gets out that you are here." "Let them talk. I stopped caring what people thought about me a long time ago." He finished his beans and pushed his plate back. "That was good, thank you. It was barely anything. It was home cooking. That counts for a lot." Bethany felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the food. She stood and began clearing the plates, but Russell rose and gently took them from her hands. "You have had a hard day. Let me clean up. You are a guest. I am a partner, remember? Partners help each other." He washed the dishes in the basin while Bethany dried and put them away, and the domesticity of the moment struck her with unexpected force. It had been so long since she had shared these simple tasks with another person, since someone had cared enough to help without being asked. James had been good about such things, always willing to pitch in, and she had not realized how much she missed that until now, when the kitchen was clean. Russell retrieved his bedroll and supplies from his horse and headed toward the barn. Bethany stood in the doorway, watching him go. "Russell," she called out. He turned. "Yes, I meant what I said earlier. I will find a way to repay you. And I meant what I said. You already have." He tipped his hat to her. "Good night, Bethany. Good night." She closed the door and leaned against it, her heart beating faster than it should. Russell Wolfe was a stranger, she reminded herself. She knew almost nothing about him beyond what he had told her, and people lied all the time. She should be cautious, sensible, protective of herself and what little she had. But when she closed her eyes, all she could see was the steady kindness in his blue-green gaze, the strength in his hands, the quiet confidence in his voice. Whatever his reasons for helping her, they felt genuine. And after so much loss and hardship, Bethany decided she was willing to trust that feeling. She went to bed that night and slept better than she had in months. The next morning, Bethany woke to the sound of hammering. She dressed quickly and went outside to find Russell already hard at work repairing the sagging fence around the chicken coop. He had removed his shirt in the early morning warmth, and the sight of his bare torso made her stop in her tracks. He was all muscle, his shoulders broad and powerful, his arms thick with strength, his chest and stomach defined by years of hard physical labor. Scars crisscrossed his skin, pale lines that spoke of a life lived in wild places, and his tanned skin gleamed with a light sheen of sweat. Bethany realized she was staring and quickly looked away, her cheeks heating. "You are up early," she called out, hoping her voice sounded normal. Russell glanced over and grinned. "Old habit. The mountains wake you at dawn, whether you like it or not." He set down his hammer and reached for his shirt, pulling it back on. "Did not mean to wake you. You did not. I usually rise early myself." She walked over to inspect his work. "This looks good. How long have you been out here? An hour or so. I wanted to see what needed fixing." "There is quite a list, I am afraid." "I know. I just have not had the time or the money to do much about it." "We will take it one thing at a time," Russell said. "Today, I am thinking we should focus on getting the fields ready for planting. What were you planning to grow? Corn, mostly." "Some beans and squash. I have seed saved, but I am not sure if it is enough. We can buy more if we need it. First thing is to plow and get the soil ready. You have a plow in the barn. It needs a new blade, though." "I can fix that." "Why do not you go have some breakfast, and I will get started on the plow. Then we can head to the fields." Bethany wanted to argue that she should be helping, but she could see that Russell was already focused on the task, his mind working through the problems and solutions. She went back inside and made coffee and biscuits, bringing a cup and a plate out to Russell when they were ready. He accepted them gratefully, sitting down in the shade of the barn to eat. Bethany sat beside him, her own cup warming her hands. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course." "What made you decide to come down from the mountains now? Was it really just to help someone like me, or was there something else?" Russell was quiet for a moment, sipping his coffee. "A little of both, I suppose. I have been alone for a long time, and it started to feel less like freedom and more like exile. I thought about my wife, about the dreams we had, and I realized she would not have wanted me to spend the rest of my life hiding from the world. She would have wanted me to live, to build something good, to find happiness again." He looked at Bethany. "When I saw Greaves leaving your farm yesterday, and I saw the look on your face, something clicked. I knew I could help, and I knew that maybe helping you would help me too." "I am glad you stopped," Bethany said softly. "I do not know what I would have done if you had not. You would have figured it out. You are stronger than you think." "I do not feel strong. Strength is not about feeling strong. It is about doing what needs to be done even when you are terrified, and you have been doing that for 2 years. Bethany felt tears sting her eyes, but she blinked them away. "Thank you for saying that." Russell reached over and gently squeezed her hand. The touch was brief, almost brotherly, but it sent a jolt of electricity up her arm. She met his eyes and something passed between them, some unspoken understanding that was both thrilling and terrifying. He released her hand and stood. "I should get back to work." "Yes." "And I should feed the chickens and check the garden." They spent the day working side by side, Russell repairing equipment and preparing the plow while Bethany tended to the animals and the small vegetable garden behind the house. By late afternoon, Russell had the plow ready, and they walked out to the fields together to assess the task ahead. The land stretched out before them, dry and hard, packed from the drought. It would be difficult work, but Russell seemed undaunted. "We will start here tomorrow at first light," he said. "If we work hard, we can have the first field ready to plant in 3 days." "That fast? I am a fast worker," he said with a slight grin. "And motivated." They walked back to the house as the sun began to set, and Bethany realized with a start that she had not thought about her troubles even once all day. She had been too busy working, too focused on the future rather than the past. It felt strange and wonderful at the same time. Over the next week, they fell into a routine. Russell would wake at dawn and begin working, often finishing repairs or tackling new projects before Bethany even emerged from the house. She would prepare meals, tend the animals, and then join him in whatever task he had taken on. They plowed the fields together, Russell guiding the plow while Bethany led the horse, both of them sweating and exhausted by the end of each day but satisfied with the progress they were making. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch and talk, sharing stories about their lives. Russell told her about growing up in Missouri, about learning to trap and hunt from his father, about meeting his wife at a church social and knowing instantly that she was the one. Bethany told him about her childhood in Arkansas, about moving to Texas with James full of hope and dreams, about the joy of those first years and the crushing weight of loss that followed. The more time they spent together, the more comfortable Bethany became around him. Russell was easy to talk to, never judgmental or dismissive of her feelings. He listened with genuine interest, and he shared his own vulnerabilities in return. She learned that he blamed himself for his wife's death, convinced that if he had gotten the doctor sooner or done something differently, she might have survived. Bethany understood that guilt, the way it could eat at you from the inside, and she tried to reassure him that some things were simply beyond anyone's control. "I know that in my head," Russell said one evening as they watched the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "But my heart has a harder time believing it." "Mine too," Bethany admitted. "I keep thinking if I had just been a better mother, if I had noticed the fever sooner, if I had done something, anything different, my son might still be alive." "You did everything you could," Russell said firmly. "Fever is a cruel thing. It takes children without warning, and there is nothing anyone can do to stop it sometimes. I know, but knowing and feeling are two different things. They are." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Maybe that is why we found each other. Two people who understand that particular kind of pain." Bethany turned to look at him, his profile outlined by the faint glow of lamplight from inside the house. "Maybe so." By the end of the second week, they had finished plowing all 3 fields and had begun planting. Russell proved to be as knowledgeable about farming as he had claimed, his movements efficient and practiced, as he showed Bethany the best techniques for spacing the seeds and covering them properly. They worked from dawn until dusk, their hands blistered and their backs aching, but the sight of the newly planted fields filled Bethany with a hope she had not felt in a very long time. "If we get some rain," Russell said, surveying their work, "we should have a good crop come summer. And if we do not, then we figure out something else, but I have got a feeling our luck is changing." That night, as if Russell's words had summoned it, clouds began to gather on the horizon. By morning, a gentle rain was falling, soaking into the parched earth with a sound like whispered prayers. Bethany stood on the porch and watched it fall, tears streaming down her face. Russell came to stand beside her, his hair already damp from walking between the barn and the house. "Good rain," he said. "This will help." "It is a miracle," Bethany said, her voice choked with emotion. "Maybe, or maybe it is just good timing." He looked at her and his expression softened. "You are crying." "I am just so relieved. I have been waiting for rain for so long, and now it is finally here, and the seeds are in the ground, and maybe everything is going to be all right after all." Russell reached out and gently wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. The gesture was so tender, so intimate that Bethany's breath caught in her throat. They stood frozen for a moment, his hand cupping her face, her eyes locked on his. "Bethany," he said softly, and her name on his lips sounded like a prayer. "Yes, I need to tell you something." Her heart was pounding so hard she was certain he could hear it. "What?" "I did not come here just to help you save your farm. I mean, I did, but it is more than that now. These past 2 weeks working with you, talking with you, I have felt something I have not felt in years. I have felt alive again, and I think I am falling for you." Bethany's mind went blank. Of all the things she had expected him to say, that was not on the list. "Russell, You do not have to say anything," he said quickly, dropping his hand. "I know it is too soon and you are probably not ready and I should not have said anything. I just wanted you to know, I wanted to be honest." "No, wait," Bethany said, catching his arm as he started to turn away. "I am glad you told me, and the truth is, I have been feeling the same way. I did not want to admit it, even to myself, because it seems impossible. We have only known each other for 2 weeks. Sometimes 2 weeks is enough," Russell said. "When I met my wife, I knew within a day that I was going to marry her. Not every love takes years to grow. Sometimes it just happens fast and certain." "Are you saying you want to marry me?" he laughed, a warm sound that made her smile despite her nervousness. "I am saying I would like the chance to court you properly, to see where this goes, if you are willing." Bethany thought about all the reasons she should say no. It was too fast, too risky, too potentially painful if things did not work out. But then she thought about how she felt when she was with Russell. The way his presence made everything feel possible. The way he looked at her like she was something precious and worth protecting. She thought about the loneliness she had been carrying for so long and how it had eased since he arrived. "I am willing," she said. Russell's face lit up with a joy so pure and unguarded that it made her heart ache. "You are sure?" "I am sure." He pulled her into his arms then, holding her close against his broad chest. Bethany wrapped her arms around his waist and let herself melt into his embrace, feeling safer than she had in years. The rain continued to fall around them, soaking the earth and washing away the dust of too many dry months, and it felt like the world itself was blessing this new beginning. From that moment on, their relationship deepened. Russell still slept in the barn, determined to maintain propriety, but they spent every waking hour together. He continued to work on repairs around the farm, fixing the roof, mending fences, building new shelves in the pantry. Bethany cooked for him, mended his clothes, and tended the garden that was finally starting to flourish now that the rain had come. They held hands as they walked the perimeter of the property in the evenings, checking on the crops and discussing plans for the future. Russell talked about building a proper workshop, about getting more livestock, about expanding the fields if the harvest was as good as they hoped. Bethany talked about painting the house, about getting new curtains, about maybe adopting a dog to help with herding. "I always wanted a dog," she admitted, "but James said they were too much trouble." "A good dog is never trouble," Russell said. "They are family. I will ask around town, see if anyone has puppies. You do not have to do that. I want to. I want you to have everything that makes you happy." His generosity still amazed her. He gave freely, without expectation or demand, and it made her want to give back in equal measure. She started baking his favorite foods, made him a new shirt from fabric she had been saving, and spent hours listening to him talk about his time in the mountains, genuinely interested in every story. One evening, about a month after Russell had first arrived, they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset when he said, "I need to go into town tomorrow. I want to send a telegram to my brother in Missouri, let him know I am staying here." "You have a brother?" "Two, actually, and a sister." "We have not been close since I left for the mountains, but I think it is time to reconnect. Family matters even when you have been apart. What will you tell them? Russell smiled. That I have found a place worth staying for, and a woman worth building a life with. Bethany felt her cheeks warm. That is presumptuous. We have not even talked about building a life together. Have not we, though? Every time we make plans for the farm, every time we talk about the future, we are building a life. Maybe we have not put a name to it yet, but that is what we are doing. He was right, and Bethany knew it. Somewhere along the way, without her quite realizing it, they had become a unit. Not just partners in farming, but partners in everything. Russell, she said carefully, what are we doing here? What do you want to be doing? I want. She paused, searching for the right words. I want to be happy. I want to have a future that does not feel like a constant struggle. I want to wake up in the morning and feel excited about the day instead of dreading it. And when I am with you, I feel all of those things. Then let's keep doing this, Russell said. Let us keep working together, keep building together and see where it leads. And when we are both ready, when the time feels right, we can make it permanent. You mean marriage. I mean marriage. Bethany looked out at the fields, green now, with young plants pushing up through the soil. She thought about everything that had happened in the past month, the miraculous appearance of this man who had saved her farm and captured her heart. It still felt like a dream sometimes, like she might wake up and find herself back in that moment of despair when Greaves had come to foreclose. But it was not a dream. Russell was real, solid, and strong beside her. The farm was real, thriving now under their combined care, and the feelings growing between them were real, undeniable, and powerful. I think I am ready, she said quietly. Russell turned to her, his eyes searching her face. Ready for what? Ready to make it permanent. Ready to marry you if you still want that. For a moment he just stared at her. Then he broke into a smile so wide and genuine that it transformed his entire face. Are you serious? I am serious. You were right when you said that sometimes 2 weeks is enough. Or in our case, a month. I know what I feel when I am with you, and I know that I do not want to go back to being alone. So yes, Russell Wolfe, I will marry you. He stood and pulled her to her feet, lifting her up and spinning her around. Bethany laughed, a sound of pure delight, and when he set her down, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. It was their first kiss, and it was everything Bethany had dreamed a kiss could be. Gentle but passionate, tender but full of promise. Russell's lips were soft against hers, and she felt the barely restrained strength in his arms as he held her close. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. When? Russell asked. Soon. As soon as we can arrange it. Tomorrow, Bethany laughed again. We need a minister for that, and probably a witness or two. How about next week? Next week, Russell agreed. I will ride into town first thing in the morning, talk to the preacher, send my telegram, and tell everyone that Bethany Radford is about to become Bethany Wolfe. I like the sound of that, she said, and kissed him again. The next week passed in a flurry of activity. Russell rode into town and arranged for the wedding to take place at the small church on Saturday afternoon. Word spread quickly, and several of the townspeople who knew Bethany offered to help with preparations. Mrs. Henderson, who ran the general store, insisted on making a cake. Mr. Garrett, the blacksmith, offered to provide music on his fiddle. Even Martin Greaves' assistant, Thomas, approached Bethany at the market to congratulate her and apologize for his employer's harsh treatment. Mr. Greaves is not a bad man, Thomas said quietly. He just forgets sometimes that numbers in a ledger represent people's lives. I am glad you were able to save your farm, Mrs. Radford, and I am glad you found someone to share it with. Bethany thanked him, surprised by his sincerity. It seemed that her happiness was bringing out the best in people. Or perhaps the town had simply been waiting for something to celebrate. She spent the days before the wedding cleaning the house from top to bottom, washing every curtain and beating every rug. Russell continued his work on the farm, but he also took time to build a new bed frame for the house, sturdy and well-crafted. When Bethany saw it, she felt tears well up. "It is beautiful," she said, running her hand over the smooth wood. "You deserve beautiful things," Russell replied. "And I intend to spend the rest of my life making sure you have them." On the morning of the wedding, Bethany bathed and dressed in the nicest gown she owned, a pale yellow dress that James had bought her for their first anniversary. She had hesitated to wear it, worried that it might be disrespectful to his memory, but then she realized that James would have wanted her to be happy. He had been a good man, and he would have approved of Russell. Mrs. Henderson arrived to help her with her hair, pinning it up in an elegant style and weaving in a few wildflowers that Russell had picked from the field. "You look beautiful, dear," the older woman said, stepping back to admire her work. "That man of yours is going to be struck speechless." Bethany smiled, nervous and excited in equal measure. "I hope so." They rode to town in Mrs. Henderson's buggy, arriving at the church just before noon. The small building was already filled with people, more than Bethany had expected. Apparently, the whole town had decided to attend. Russell was waiting at the altar, dressed in a new suit that he must have purchased just for the occasion. His long hair was neatly combed, his beard trimmed, and he looked more handsome than Bethany had ever seen him. When their eyes met, his face lit up with a smile that made her heart flutter. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. Reverend Matthews spoke about love and partnership, about the importance of standing together through hardship and joy. When it came time for the vows, Russell took both of Bethany's hands in his and spoke clearly. "I promise to love you, protect you, and stand by your side for the rest of my days. I promise to work hard to build the life we both deserve. And I promise to never let you face anything alone again." Bethany's voice trembled as she replied, "I promise to love you, support you, and be your partner in all things. I promise to build a home with you, to laugh with you, to dream with you. And I promise to never take for granted the gift of your presence in my life." Reverend Matthews pronounced them husband and wife, and Russell kissed her to the sound of applause and cheers from the gathered crowd. It was official. She was Bethany Wolfe now, and she had never been happier. The celebration continued at the church hall, where tables had been set up with food and drink. The townspeople brought dishes to share, and someone had even procured a bottle of whiskey for toasting. Russell kept Bethany close to his side all afternoon, his arm around her waist, his pride evident in the way he looked at her. "I am the luckiest man alive," he told anyone who would listen. "This woman is going to make me better than I ever thought I could be." As the sun began to set, they said their goodbyes and rode back to the farm together. Russell helped Bethany down from the horse, then swept her up in his arms and carried her over the threshold of the house. "It is tradition," he said when she laughed in surprise. "I thought you did not care about tradition. I care about the ones that matter." He set her down gently, and they stood in the quiet house, suddenly shy with each other. The reality of what they had just done, the commitment they had made, seemed to fill the space between them. "Are you nervous?" Russell asked. "A little," Bethany admitted. "Are you?" "A little," he echoed. Then he smiled and took her hand. "But I am more excited than nervous. I have been dreaming about this moment for weeks." He led her to the bedroom, where the new bed frame held a mattress covered in fresh linens. Candles were lit on the dresser, casting a warm glow over everything. Russell had done this, Bethany realized. He had prepared this space for them for their first night as husband and wife. "Russell," she whispered, overcome with emotion. "I want everything to be perfect for you," he said. "You have been through so much. You deserve something beautiful." She turned to face him, reaching up to cup his bearded cheek. "You are what is beautiful, you and your kindness and your strength. I do not need anything else." He kissed her then, slow and deep, and Bethany felt herself melting into him. His hands moved to the buttons of her dress, and she helped him, suddenly eager to feel his skin against hers. They undressed each other with fumbling hands and nervous laughter, the awkwardness fading as they explored this new intimacy. When they finally came together, it was with a tenderness that brought tears to Bethany's eyes. Russell was gentle, attentive to her every response, and the connection between them felt like something sacred. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the new bed, Bethany's head on Russell's chest, his arms wrapped protectively around her. "I love you," she said, the words coming easily now. "I love you too," Russell replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "More than I ever thought possible." They fell asleep like that, warm and safe in each other's arms, and for the first time in years, Bethany did not have nightmares about loss and failure. Instead, she dreamed of green fields and abundant harvests, of laughter and children, of a future that stretched out bright and full of promise. The next months passed in a blur of hard work and happiness. The crops grew tall under the summer sun, aided by regular rains that seemed to have finally broken the drought. Russell continued to make improvements to the farm, building a new chicken coop, repairing the barn roof, and even constructing a small workshop where he could do carpentry during the winter months. Bethany threw herself into homemaking with renewed energy. She planted a larger vegetable garden, started making preserves and pickles, and began raising chickens for both eggs and meat. Russell had indeed found her a puppy, a border collie mix they named Jack, who proved to be as smart as he was energetic. The dog quickly became an invaluable helper, herding the chickens and alerting them to any potential problems. In late August, they harvested their first crop. The corn had grown tall and healthy, the ears full and golden. Russell and Bethany worked side by side in the fields, cutting and gathering, and when they finally stood back to survey the results, they both felt a surge of pride. "We did it," Bethany said, hardly believing it. "We actually did it." "You doubted we would," Russell teased. "Maybe a little." "It has been so long since anything went right." Russell pulled her close. "Things are going to keep going right. We are going to build something amazing here, you and I." They sold most of the corn in town, keeping back enough for their own use and for seed for next year. The profit was better than Bethany had dared hope, enough to pay for more supplies, to buy a second cow, and to put some money aside for the future. "We should celebrate," Russell said as they counted the money at the kitchen table. "How?" "We could go to the hotel for dinner. Have a real date, just the two of us." Bethany smiled. "I would like that." They dressed in their best clothes and rode into Desdemona that evening, leaving Jack to guard the farm. The hotel restaurant was small but nice, with white tablecloths and candles on every table. Russell ordered steak and potatoes, and Bethany chose the chicken, and they shared a bottle of wine that made her cheeks flush and her laughter come more easily. "To us," Russell said, raising his glass. "To us," Bethany echoed, clinking her glass against his. They talked about everything and nothing, their conversation flowing easily. Russell told her about his plans for the winter, about how he wanted to build furniture to sell in town. Bethany told him about her idea to start selling eggs and preserves at the market, to create a steady income stream beyond just the harvest. "You are brilliant," Russell said, and he meant it. "I am practical," Bethany corrected. "There is a difference. You are both." As they walked back to the horses after dinner, Bethany felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. She stumbled, and Russell caught her immediately, his arm strong and steady. "Are you all right?" he asked, concern etched on his face. "I am fine. Just a little dizzy, probably the wine. Let us get you home and into bed." But the dizziness persisted over the next few days, accompanied by nausea that struck her most strongly in the mornings. Bethany tried to hide it, not wanting to worry Russell, but he noticed anyway. "You need to see the doctor," he said firmly after finding her vomiting behind the barn for the third morning in a row. "I am fine. It is just a stomach complaint. Bethany, please, let me take you to town." She agreed, mostly to stop him from worrying, but also because a small part of her had begun to suspect what might be causing her symptoms. Dr. Morrison examined her in his small office above the general store, asking questions about her symptoms, and when they had started. When he finished, he smiled at her. "Mrs. Wolfe, I believe you are pregnant, about 2 months along, I would say." Bethany stared at him, the words not quite registering. "Pregnant? Yes, congratulations." She walked out of the office in a daze, finding Russell pacing anxiously in the waiting area. He rushed to her immediately. "What did he say?" "Are you all right?" "I am pregnant," Bethany said, and then burst into tears. Russell's face went through a rapid series of emotions, from shock to joy to concern. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "Why are you crying? Is something wrong?" "No, nothing is wrong. I am just so happy and scared, and I do not know what I am feeling." He laughed, a sound of pure relief. "We are going to have a baby." "We are going to have a baby," she repeated, and this time when she said it, she was smiling. They rode home in a state of euphoria, already making plans. Russell insisted that Bethany reduce her workload immediately, that he would take over the heavier chores. Bethany protested that she was perfectly capable of working, but she appreciated his protectiveness. "I already lost one child," she said quietly that evening. "I cannot lose another." "You will not," Russell promised fiercely. "I will make sure of it. You and this baby are the most important things in the world to me." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Bethany's morning sickness faded after the first trimester, and she found herself with more energy than she had expected. Russell was endlessly attentive, bringing her water, rubbing her feet when they swelled, and talking to her growing belly every night. "I am telling our son or daughter about the farm," he explained when Bethany asked what he was saying. "About how hard we worked to build this place. About how loved they already are." Winter came, and with it a slowdown in farm work. Russell spent his days in the workshop building furniture, while Bethany knitted baby clothes and prepared the small bedroom off the main room to be a nursery. They painted the walls a soft cream color and built a cradle together, Russell handling the construction while Bethany sanded and finished the wood. "It is perfect," she said when they placed it in the nursery. "Our child is going to have everything," Russell said. "Everything we can give." In March, as the first signs of spring began to appear, Bethany went into labor. Russell rode to town to fetch Dr. Morrison and Mrs. Henderson, who had offered to help with the birth. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day, but finally, just as the sun was setting, a baby's cry filled the house. "It is a boy," Dr. Morrison announced, placing the squalling infant in Bethany's arms. She looked down at her son, at his red face and tiny fists, and felt her heart expand with a love so fierce it almost hurt. Russell appeared at her side, his eyes wet with tears. "He is perfect," he whispered. "Absolutely perfect." "What should we name him?" Bethany asked. Russell thought for a moment. "What about James? After your first husband, he should be remembered." Bethany felt tears spill down her cheeks. "Are you sure?" "I am sure. James Wolfe. It is a strong name." They named their son James Russell Wolfe, and he became the center of their world. Russell proved to be a devoted father, getting up in the middle of the night to walk with the baby when he cried, making silly faces to earn smiles. and talking to James constantly about everything from the weather to the crops. "You are going to give him ideas above his station," Bethany teased one day, finding Russell explaining his carpentry techniques to the 3-month-old. "He is going to be smart," Russell said confidently. "I can tell. He has your eyes." Life on the farm settled into a new rhythm. They planted crops in the spring, tended them through the summer, and harvested in the fall. Each year brought new challenges, but also new triumphs. The farm prospered under their combined efforts, growing from a struggling homestead into a thriving operation. When James was 2 years old, Bethany discovered she was pregnant again. This time, she greeted the news with excitement rather than fear. Their daughter, Rose, was born in the autumn, and she had Russell's blue-green eyes and a temperament as sweet as her name suggested. "2 children," Russell said, holding Rose while James climbed on his back. "We are truly blessed." "We are," Bethany agreed, watching her family with a contentment that still surprised her sometimes. The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their children. James grew into a sturdy, curious boy who followed his father everywhere, learning about farming and carpentry. Rose was gentler, preferring to help her mother in the garden and with the chickens. On a warm evening in June of 1882, 6 years after Russell had first appeared at the farm, Bethany and Russell sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard. James was teaching Rose how to whistle, with limited success, and their laughter carried across the fields. "Do you ever think about that day?" Russell asked. "The day I showed up here, all the time," Bethany said. "I was so lost, I thought my life was over. And now," she looked at him, at the man who had saved her in every way that mattered. "Now I know it was just beginning." "You gave me back my future, Russell. You gave me hope and love and a family. Everything I have now is because you stopped that day instead of riding past." Russell took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "I almost did not stop. I almost kept riding, figured you had your own problems and I should stay out of it, but something told me to turn around to see if you needed help. I have thanked God every day since for that impulse. So have I." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The fields stretched out around them, green and thriving, full of promise for another good harvest. The house behind them was solid and well-maintained, filled with the sounds and smells of a happy home. "I love you," Russell said, the words as meaningful now as they had been the first time he spoke them. "I love you too," Bethany replied. "Always." As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Russell pulled Bethany close and pressed a kiss to her temple. Their children's laughter mingled with the evening sounds of the farm, crickets chirping and the distant lowing of cattle. It was a simple moment, unremarkable in many ways, but it held everything that mattered. They had built this life together, brick by brick, day by day, through hard work and determination and love. The banker who had tried to take it all away was just a distant memory now, a footnote in the story of how a mountain man had appeared when hope seemed lost and changed everything. Bethany thought about the woman she had been 6 years ago, desperate and afraid, facing the loss of everything she held dear. She wanted to tell that woman not to give up, that help was coming, that the story was far from over. But she could not go back, could only be grateful for the path that had led her here, to this porch, with this man, surrounded by the evidence of their shared devotion. "What are you thinking about?" Russell asked, sensing her contemplative mood. "I am thinking about how lucky I am." "How lucky we are." "Luck had nothing to do with it. We worked for this, fought for it, maybe, but I still feel lucky." Russell smiled and stood, pulling her to her feet. "Dance with me." "There is no music. We do not need music." He began to hum a tune, something slow and sweet, and they swayed together on the porch as the children continued to play. Bethany rested her head on Russell's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, and felt a peace so profound it brought tears to her eyes. This was home. Not just the farm, not just the house, but this. The feeling of Russell's arms around her, the sound of her children's happiness, the knowledge that she was loved and cherished and would never be alone again. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what? For everything. For stopping that day. For paying the debt. For helping me plant new crops. For loving me." Russell tilted her face up to his and kissed her softly. "Thank you for letting me. Thank you for taking a chance on a lonely mountain man who did not know what he was looking for until he found you." They kissed again, deeper this time, and when they broke apart, both of them were smiling. James and Rose had stopped playing to watch them, making exaggerated gagging sounds at their parents' display of affection. "One day, you two will understand," Russell called out to them. "One day, you will find someone who makes you feel the way your mother makes me feel, and you will not care who sees you being affectionate." "Never," James declared with the absolute certainty of a 6-year-old. "We will see," Bethany said, laughing. As the night deepened and the children finally tired of their games, Russell carried Rose inside while James walked alongside, holding his mother's hand. They tucked the children into bed, listening to their prayers and kissing them goodnight, and then retired to their own room. Russell undressed and climbed into the bed he had built all those years ago, holding the covers open for Bethany. She slipped in beside him, curling into his warmth, and they lay together in the darkness, simply enjoying each other's presence. "You ever miss the mountains?" Bethany asked. "Sometimes," Russell admitted. "I miss the solitude, the simplicity, but I would not trade this for anything. This life with you and our children is worth more than all the freedom in the world. You could go visit, take a trip, spend some time up there, I would understand. Maybe someday. But right now there is nowhere else I want to be." Bethany kissed his jaw, then his neck, then his lips. "Good, because I need you here. I always need you here." They made love slowly, tenderly, with the ease of long familiarity and the passion of deep devotion. Afterward they lay entwined, Bethany's head on Russell's shoulder, his hand stroking her hair. "Tell me about the future," Bethany said sleepily. "What do you see for us?" Russell was quiet for a moment, thinking. "I see more crops, more animals, maybe another child or two if we are blessed. I see James learning to run the farm and Rose finding her own path. I see us growing old together, sitting on that porch when our hair is gray and our hands are gnarled, still holding hands and talking about our day. I see a good life, Bethany, a life full of love and meaning." "That sounds perfect," she whispered. "It does not it?" They drifted off to sleep, wrapped in each other's arms, secure in the knowledge that whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, they would face them together. The farm was theirs, paid for with Russell's money and their combined sweat and determination. The crops were growing, the children were healthy, and the love between them grew stronger with each passing day. In the years that followed, they would face new trials. There would be harsh winters and dry summers, years of good harvests and years of poor ones. Rose would grow into a beautiful young woman who would eventually marry the son of a neighboring farmer, giving Bethany and Russell their first grandchild. James would take over more and more of the farm work, proving himself to be as capable and hardworking as his father. Russell would eventually make that trip back to the mountains, taking James with him for a month-long journey when the boy turned 14. They would return with stories of bear encounters and sleeping under the stars, and James would understand for the first time where his father had come from and what he had given up to build a life with them. Bethany would continue to expand her preserve and egg business, eventually supplying several stores in neighboring towns. She would become known throughout the county for her excellent products and her kind heart, always willing to help a struggling neighbor or offer advice to a young farmer. But through it all, through every triumph and setback, the foundation of their lives would remain the same. The love between Bethany and Russell, forged in a moment of desperate need and nurtured through years of partnership, would never waver. They would continue to dance on the porch in the evenings, to talk late into the night about their dreams and fears, to support and cherish each other with unwavering devotion. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the work was done and the children were occupied, Bethany would look at Russell and remember the day he had ridden up to her farm like an answer to a prayer. She would remember the fear she had felt, the desperation, and then the overwhelming relief when he had offered to help. She would remember falling in love with him, slowly at first and then all at once, until the thought of life without him became unbearable. Russell would catch her looking and smile, that same warm smile that had won her heart all those years ago. And without words, they would understand each other perfectly, the way only two people who have built a life together can. The farm would continue to thrive, a testament to their hard work and dedication. The fields would produce abundant crops year after year, the livestock would multiply, and the house would ring with the sounds of family gatherings and celebrations. It would become more than just a place to live. It would become a legacy, something to pass down to their children and their children's children. But none of that would matter nearly as much as the simple fact that they had found each other, that in a world full of hardship and loss, they had been given the gift of love and partnership. That the banker's attempt to foreclose had led not to an ending, but to a beginning. As the moon rose high over the Texas landscape, casting silver light across the farmland, Bethany and Russell slept peacefully, their bodies curved together, their breathing synchronized. Outside, the crops rustled in the gentle breeze, the animals settled into their pens, and the land itself seemed to rest, satisfied with the care it received from the two people who loved it and each other so deeply. It was a good life. A hard life, certainly, full of challenges and sacrifice. But it was theirs, built from nothing through determination and love. And as the years continued to unfold, as their story continued to be written day by day, that would remain the truest thing about them. They had saved each other, Bethany and Russell. She had given him a reason to return to the world, to believe in the possibility of happiness again. He had given her security, partnership, and a love that healed the wounds of her past losses. Together, they had created something beautiful and lasting. And when they were old and gray, sitting on that same porch that had witnessed so many moments of their lives together, they would look back on this time with profound gratitude. They would remember the day a mountain man paid a debt and helped plant new crops, not knowing he was also planting the seeds of a love that would flourish for the rest of their lives. The story of Bethany and Russell Wolfe would become legend in Desdemona, Texas. People would speak of them with admiration. The widow who refused to give up, and the mountain man who gave her a second chance at happiness. Young couples would look at them and see proof that love could triumph over hardship, that partnerships built on mutual respect and devotion could weather any storm. But for Bethany and Russell themselves, none of that mattered. They did not need to be legendary. They only needed each other and the life they had built together on that small farm that had almost been lost. They only needed the quiet moments, the shared glances, the laughter and tears and everything in between, and that ultimately was enough. More than enough. It was everything.